So I suppose the real question is this movie fair and balanced? Sorry, that's all I've got. So, over the weekend, my partner Liz and I took a look at Bombshell, which was the movie that was made about the sexual harassment scandal that rocked Fox News a few years back and led to the ousting of Roger Ailes, who had been running the network and arguably had built it into what it was in the first place, and also Bill O'Reilly and some other folks as well. And this was a movie that both she and I were interested in. I mean, partly for the premise, but also largely because of the cast. It's a really good cast. You've got Charlize Theron, you've got Nicole Kidman, you have got John Lithgow, you have got Margot Robbie. It's pretty stacked. And ultimately, when the film wrapped, I found myself thinking, this might be about as well as you could tell this story from an acting, directing, writing standpoint. Although it's taking more than a few cues from The Big Short in terms of like addressing the camera now and then and things like that. But it's fine. It works, especially for these sort of true to life stories. But it didn't land the way the film seemed to want it to land by the end. And I think that probably has to do with an inherent issue in telling this story. So what I mean by that is, so speaking as an acknowledged SJW liberal cuck, I came into this, I don't have a particularly high opinion of Fox News. I just don't. And what that means is by the time it's over, the people that I'm supposed to be rooting for, I don't really like as people. Not like, please understand, none of these people deserved what happened to them. Nobody does. Nobody deserves that kind of harassment, especially in the workplace, in their attempts to better themselves and their careers. Nobody. So I don't ever twist my words as saying, they kind of deserve. No, they did not. But my sympathy can only extend so far. It can basically not extend too much farther than, wow, what happened to you was really terrible. But I can't really get over the fact that I still don't really like you. And so that puts a cap on how cathartic and triumphant it is when Roger Ailes goes down at the end. Which, I mean, there's some like schadenfreude to be had in that, but it can only take you so far because I wouldn't root for the people involved really under almost any other circumstances. And like, that's not to say you can't tell a story where, maybe nobody's really all that good, but the end of the film does go for a like, and justice was done vibe. And it's like, well, yes, got rid of that guy. It definitely should have happened. Should have happened a lot sooner than it did. But I'm like, how much better is the world? Is this world that we've even been watching? I think it's very telling that the two characters who I connected with and cared about the most were the two who were made up for the film, as opposed to any of the ones based off actual real life people. And that's not to knock the performances. Performances are actually great across the board. But like, as far as characters I invested in emotionally, I invested the most, I would say the most in Kate McKinnon. This is probably the best performance I've seen her give. And her character is fascinating. Not a real person, but she's fascinating. This person who she got involved at Fox because she doesn't hold any of the political beliefs that get pushed at Fox at all. But she started there because it was the only job she could get, but now she's trapped there. She can't get work at other news outlets because she's worked at Fox. And that leads to a lot of assumptions about a bias on her part. So she landed a job because it was what she could get at the time, and now she's stuck there, even though she absolutely doesn't belong there. And like how much she allows herself to get pushed down and hidden and eaten by what's going on. Like, that was interesting. And seeing Margot Robbie connect with her and their relationship was really interesting. It's a side plot, because again, the story largely focuses on the people who were real, which I think in terms of if you're telling a real story, you should have the focus be on people who were actually involved in what was going on instead of injecting the fake people and and here's this story. But I can't pretend that I didn't connect more with the made up people than with the real people. That's just kind of what ended up happening. And I found myself wondering, ultimately, who was this made for? Because anyone on the more decidedly liberal side of things, like me, is going to end up with the problem I just described. I would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine that anyone on the more conservative end wouldn't get that much catharsis out of it either, because they'd be watching what had, and probably still is in many ways, the bastion of conservative thought in mass media get taken apart and eat itself alive from the inside out. And I can't imagine that would be particularly cathartic for them either. I actually was talking to Jessie Gender about this after I saw it. The only thing that, the thing that she floated, which actually kind of makes sense, is that it was made for middle of the road Academy voters. It does kind of have the feel of not traditional Oscar bait, but sort of the more modern, slightly edgier Oscar bait. The let's take on modern day issues Oscar bait that you see with stuff like The Big Short, which I already mentioned. I think it really does want to be that movie in a lot of ways. Yeah, it does have that. It feels like it was built to please moderates, but the problem with that, and I'm not saying people with moderate views don't deserve to enjoy a piece of entertainment, but when you appeal to the middle, you tend to end up with something that doesn't quite land as it should. More or less, if something's going to land with your intended audience, you need to pick a side. When you aim at the middle, you end up with something middling. That's not to say there's a problem with trying to appeal to a wide audience. There's a difference between aiming for broad appeal and aiming just trying to be in the middle and be fair to all elements or whatnot. And it feels like that's the mentality this film was kind of built out of. And at the end, I'm glad I saw it. It was pretty good. But it is a film that, if it did not have the actors that it did, turning in the performances that they do, it'd be hard for me to recommend. It's not bad. If you can get it streaming, certainly at no cost, it's worth the time. We unfortunately couldn't. We had to purchase it, and it wasn't worth that. But I don't regret seeing it. I guess that's kind of where I land. Bombshell. Part of me wonders if the fact that I'm even talking about a politically charged film at all and putting my thoughts on the record is going to end up resulting in a disaster in the comments section. I'm going to be nervous putting this up now, and I shouldn't be. Or I shouldn't have to be, at least. Anyways, have you seen it? What are your thoughts about it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Usual stuff, like, share, subscribe. I have a Patreon, and that is what pays my bills, keeps this whole thing up and running. Any amount helps, but you also don't have to. Take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break.